I'm gonna mute.
All
I'll mute
right, we're
myself.
being recorded now, everybody. And we're going to be starting tonight on page 35, Thoughts versus Awareness. And I do believe this is our 19th or 20th session, something like that. This is Just This by Richard Rohr. And we do want to point out, if you're watching us through the archive, and you've been watching us through the archive, it is possible, and you are most welcome to join us live. And all of the information that you'll need, you can find in the comments section underneath the window. So take a look there, and links will be there if you'd like to join us live. We would love to be able to interact with you. All right, before we dive into the text, is there any old business? Does anyone have anything that they've been processing through the week that you wanted to bring up, talk about before we get some new stuff going? Hey, Kathy, go.
I do. I wanted to just say one thing that I thought about after we hung up last week, and it's at the very top of page 35, that last sentence before the new paragraph. Remember, we talked about this quite a bit. The older I get, the more I know the patience and mercy of God with my soul. And it made me think of something. I don't know if anybody else saw it, but a couple of Sundays ago, they had an interview on a Sunday morning show with Steve Martin, the comedian Steve Martin. And it was a very humbling kind of interview, very brief, and he was saying that he really didn't know, his talent when he was first getting into comedy. He thought he was talentless and that kind of thing, and he was very grateful for the success he's had with his banjo and his comedy and all that kind of stuff. And the interviewer asked him and said, what do you want to do with your life now? He's 78 years old. And Steve Martin made a very interesting comment, and I was thinking about it all week. He says, I want to be a better version of myself in the second half of my life. He says, I know a lot of people that are becoming a worse version of themselves in their second half of life. They're more resentful, they become mean, they become bitter, they're angrier. And he said, I don't want that. I want to be happier and lighter and have a simplicity in my life and have love and happiness and those kinds of things. And I thought that was very poignant of him to say that. And I thought, I want that too. So I just wanted to bring that up. I thought it was very interesting and kind of apropos for what we were just talking about last week. So I don't know. I just wanted to bring it up. That's all. I'll stop talking now.
That is perfect. I like Steve Martin even better now.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's always been one of my faves, but that is perfect. There's that saying, you never want to meet your heroes. But I think in this case, he may be a hero I would like to meet. If he's
Yeah.
got that kind of attitude and he's
Very
willing to say it
humble.
out loud.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He was. It was very cool. Anyway.
But that's it. That's it. The older we get, the more we know the patience and mercy of God. Maybe, you know, it's like we were saying, you're supposed to get wiser as you get older. Some of us just get older. And hopefully this whole process that we're engaged in, this contemplative practice, is what really is going to help us to do exactly what Steve Martin is talking about. To occupy that liminal space, to stay in the threshold, to not flop down to one side or another of extremes, and see the world in that kind of duality that allows us to treat others with such disrespect. And we see it happening throughout our society, but we are salmon. We're salmon and anchovies, I like to say. We're salmon because we're swimming upstream, and we're anchovies because we're going to be so strong in our flavor that people are going to either like us a lot or not so much a lot, right? They're not going to be ambivalent about us because we're going to be anchovies and salmon. So there you go.
Good.
Anything else? We can also welcome Randy. Randy comes to us from the Las Vegas area of Nevada. So we're all impressing Tanya. Tanya's up here for the first time, Randy, and so we're showing her how eclectic we are, how spread out.
Hey, Randy, it's Ken.
I can.
Welcome back.
Yeah.
All right, so we are still in the first chapter of Just This, and he has been developing his idea of this moment of awe. and everything that goes into becoming the kind of person who can be awed by any given moment of experience. It doesn't need to be spectacular. It doesn't need to comport with what we think a spectacular or spiritual moment should be, what a deep or insightful moment should be. It doesn't have to comport with our preferences or our aversions or anything. If we can approach every moment and be stunned by it, be awed by it, be drawn in by it, then we are starting to develop a contemplative mind, one that all of that stuff can be pulled away. We can step away from our egoic torrent of thoughts and be able to just see what's right in front of us. As he would say, just this. If we can do that, if we can let the moment be enough for us, we are entering into the contemplative mind. And all of this chapter has been developing that thought in these short little bites. So we got another short little bite tonight. And although Ellen would be very skeptical that we can go any further than this one little bite, we'll see what we can do, because it's pretty short. All right, thoughts versus awareness, page 35. In the interior castle, St. Teresa of Avila says, I came to realize by experience that thinking is not the same thing as mindfulness, what I call awareness. I had not been able to understand why, if the mind is one of the faculties of the soul, it is sometimes so restless. Thoughts fly around so fast that only God can anchor them. It was driving me crazy to see the faculties of my soul calmly absorbed in remembrance of God, while my thoughts, on the other hand, were wildly agitated. Your thoughts are always hopping around, always making commentaries on everything. Buddhists rightly refer to this as the monkey mind. Once you give your thoughts too much certainty and centrality, they will almost immediately grab onto a legitimizing emotion, tightly and righteously. Once emotion reinforces thought, or vice versa, it triples its power over you. The things you're agitated about right now, you will not be in a few hours or days, so they cannot be that real. Once you know that, you can choose not to give them such power and control over you to begin with. The soul is much more spacious, constant, and settled than your thoughts and feelings can ever be. Beth and Brady couldn't be with us tonight from Phoenix. They texted me. I was really sorry that Beth wasn't going to be here tonight, because we spent the entire hour in our conversations last night, talking around this issue. And she was saying that, she just can't control her thoughts. Her thoughts are just all over the place, constantly pounding on her, constantly hopping around. And one of the things that I really wanted to get across to her, because she thought she was somehow, the only one out there who had this problem. And I said, everybody has this problem. Everybody. It's, some to more or less degree. But here's Teresa of Avila telling us the exact same things, one of the great mystics of the church of all time, right? And yet she is talking about the same thing. We all have this problem. We're going to be talking about the difference between thoughts and awareness in this little section. Before we come back and start dissecting, was there anything that jumped out at you? Anything that you wanted to comment on? Nope. Okay. So let's go back to the top and let's start pulling it apart a little bit. See what we got here. So in the interior castle, if you're not familiar with that book by Teresa of Avila, it's one of the masterpieces of the church in terms of mystic and contemplative thought. So this is her magnum opus, right? And she was 1515 to 1582. So she says in the interior castle, I came to realize by experience that thinking is not the same thing as mindfulness. And in brackets, what I call awareness. I'm assuming that's Richard Rohr's voice popping in there and not hers. I had not been able to understand why, if the mind is one of the faculties of the soul, it is sometimes so restless. So this idea that thinking is not the same thing as mindfulness. Thinking is not the same thing as awareness. Now, we've been hammering on that for weeks now. Is anybody still either not clear on the difference between awareness and thinking, or has not been able to experience the difference? That we need to develop it a little further? So you guys are so advanced, you know exactly what we're talking about, right?
Sure do.
Okay. Tanya, is this a mind bender for you? That thinking and awareness are two different things?
I've been reading along earlier parts of just this, so I'm not going to say I'm super well versed, but I would love for this group to give me what you've arrived at and what the consensus is on the definitions of these.
Okay. Okay. Would anyone who is now an expert on the difference between thinking and awareness like to tell us what you understand about the difference between them?
Well, I'll jump in. Nobody's talking, so I'll
Okay.
say so.
Go
Is
for
that
it.
okay?
I'll,
Ken.
I'll talk
you off.
because it says host has muted you, so I unmuted myself. So 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago, I have what Dave calls monkey brain. It was just this racing thoughts, this agitation, this, but he said this and I did that and then they did it. It's just constant. It was giving me a lot of stress and my blood pressure went up to 150 over 100. It scared me. It scared me that I was going to have a stroke until he taught me things to tell myself, prayers, and it's okay to pray and chant and just, I felt it was calming down. And whenever it happens again, you redirect, and it happens less often now. Not that I'm an expert, but it happens less often.
That's great,
So-
Ellen. Yeah.
No
Ken?
expert here. Yeah, no expert here at all. I really wrestle with this. My brain wants to solve problems. That's how it's wired. You know what I mean? I'm always like, well, the devil's advocate side of me says this, and it just has to analyze every thought that goes through. But when I'm in centering prayer and I've calmed my soul, and it gets easier with time, you really can just be in a state of mindfulness where there aren't words. You're watching them. And this really helped when I got this picture. So I got a picture of a river going by and little sailing boats going by, and those are my thoughts. But I don't say that. I just watch, and I watch the thoughts just go by. And the more I've done that, the more it was do that. And it's easy to get broken with thoughts. So the time you're aware of it, wow, this is cool, I'm mindful, then you're not because you're analyzing it. But yeah, this has been what I need because I don't operate naturally in a mindful or awareness state. That's not who I am.
You're in good company, Ken. It's not who most of us are. Since early childhood, most of us are not naturally contemplatives. We have to relearn. And so that's what this is all about.
I am definitely no expert either. And I think I'm still in the process of trying to determine the answer to this, but in my mind, I think of thoughts versus awareness. I feel like they're related in a sense, like there's pieces of them that are the same, but holistically looking at them, like I can think I have the thought that thoughts to me in my mind have more judgment. Awareness is more like witnessing, but there's still awareness can still be in the shape of a thought, but without the judgment. I guess I think I have the thought that I see a chair is and more of an awareness to me, like a thought without judgment. I don't know.
Actually, Sarah, I love that The difference is the difference between judging and witnessing. That's perfect.
Mhm.
That's really, really good. Those two verbs help us to contrast. You can witness something without thinking about it, without judging it. One of the examples that works for me is, you're having a conversation with something and your phone's in your pocket and it starts vibrating. You have it on vibrate and it starts vibrating in your pocket. So you feel the vibration, a call's coming in. But if you just stay connected, to the conversation, you just hold your eye contact, you're just aware that the phone is ringing. But there's no impulse to answer it. You're not wondering who is calling. You're not thinking about it. You're not attaching words to the fact that the phone is ringing, and you're not reaching for it to take a look. That is awareness without thinking about it. You're witnessing that the phone is ringing, but you're not making any kind of judgment about it. And more importantly, one of the best definitions I've heard of a thought is when your focus comes to a point on one person, place, or thing, whatever that happens to be. That's what we're trying to define as a thought. All your awareness comes to that point, to the exclusion of everything else, basically, because you're thinking about one thing, then everything else is gone. If you're not thinking about anything, then you can be aware of everything sort of at the same time, but you're just witnessing it. You're not thinking about it. You're not judging it. You're not giving it any sort of valence. So we can witness things. We can become aware of them without bringing our focus to a point, without attaching words to it, without restarting the interior monologue. We do it all the time. We've talked about this before. Those of you who are artists, you get into that state of flow, you're just doing. It's all muscle memory at that point. It's just pure awareness, but you're not thinking about anything. And we've experienced that in all sorts of ways, from watching a sunset to riding a bike to playing with your grandchildren, whatever it happens to be. But we know what that feels like. And that is that state of pure presence that we're talking about. There is no filter. There's nothing between us and what we're experiencing at the moment. And that's the difference between the two. We can be aware without thinking. But it happens just at random times when whatever is going on is engaging enough or intense enough that we just stay present to it. What we're trying to do in contemplative practice is to train ourselves to be able to do this at will, to step away from the torrent of thoughts, the thought stream, and just be present, just witness things, just be aware of things without having to think about them. The only way that we're really going to experience God is when we're not thinking about God. Again, that quote from Angelus Silesius, if God is going to come visit you, he can only come visit you when you're not there. Think about that for a second. You have to not be there in terms of your egoic thought stream in order for God to visit you. And since God and spirit, breath, wind are always in motion and are defined by motion, the only way we're really going to experience God is when we're in that same motion. As soon as you think a thought, you're taking a snapshot. And now you're looking at the image, the static, dead image. You're no longer in motion with the spirit. So this is what we're trying to do in contemplation. But this insight that she's talking about, I came to realize by experience that thinking is not the same thing as mindfulness, or what Richard Rohr would call awareness, and I like awareness better. That is a real revelation. And until and unless you get that, you're probably going to think that awareness is more and more intensive thinking. I'm really aware of something if I'm thinking about it. Sometimes we even use contemplation. To contemplate something is to think more deeply about it. That's not the way we're using contemplation here. And it's not the way we're using awareness here. Contemplatively, awareness and contemplation are without thought, without our focus coming to a point. Now she says, I had not been able to understand why, if the mind is one of the faculties of the soul, it is sometimes so restless. So, is the mind one of the faculties of the soul? Now, what do we mean by faculty? And what do we mean by soul? I mean, you got to go right back to the beginning and start redefining everything so we know what we're talking about here, right? What's a faculty? We're not talking about teachers in a school here. A faculty is basically just some mental or physical power that you have, but it's a little bit more than that. The power is inherent to you. That means it's kind of built in, it's kind of intrinsic to, it's integral to the system or the person. So the power is part of you. So a mental power, a mental faculty is obviously your ability to think. What is your faculties of the soul? Now, we spent a lot of time talking about the soul, and we're gonna talk about it again here tonight. But before we get into that, do you think that the mind is a faculty of the soul?
Wow.
I was going to say awareness is a faculty of the soul, but I don't know if I'm splitting hairs here.
No, I think you're onto something, William. Can you develop that a little bit more?
That's about as far as I can take that.
That's great.
But yeah, the word mind just seems like it's like when I hear that, I'm thinking more of like the brain and like I don't know. I think awareness or consciousness is more of where like that resonates
Hmm.
better for me than the word mind.
Okay.
Dave,
Yeah.
would it be fair to say that thinking is intake mode? You have a lot of things coming at your brain a million miles an hour. Where to step next? Is it carpet? Is it tile? Is it slippery? And you're handling every micro detail of life. But awareness for me is when I stop and focus my thinking on one thing and shut out everything else. And then I'm really aware that I'm thinking
Mm.
about the spot on the floor. Is it slippery? Do I need to avoid it? Do I need to grab a handrail, etc.? Would that be fair to
I would flip that order of that around a little bit, I think. Like
elaborate,
awareness
William?
seems more passive and thinking is something I'm doing, whereas awareness is just it just is.
I was thinking that when I think, like I'm thinking to have this conversation right now, but as my day unfolds, I have a bazillion thoughts that I don't stop and give awareness to. I mean, it's countless how many thoughts I have during the day. And does
And
that,
that's a good point, Scott, because being
ahead, Dave.
contemplative state does not mean that we're not going to have thoughts or that we're not going to be aware that thoughts are in our head. What it means is we're not going to choose to think about the thoughts. So,
Right.
it's like that age-old image of you sitting on the bank of a river and you're watching all the things floating down the river, whether it's tree branches or leaves or whatever it happens to be. But if you don't pick one out and start thinking about it and start, adding some sort of valence to it, and it's just passing by, then you're still in an uninterrupted state of choiceless awareness, is probably a good way to put it. You're aware of everything, but you're choosing not to think about any one of them. And so in that case, and then what William, I think, was getting to is like, maybe we can think of awareness as reception. We are receiving, whereas thinking is projection. We're projecting into what we're experiencing rather than just in a pure receiving mode. Maybe that helps.
It's more
Throwing a
proactive.
lot of words
what
at
you're
this,
saying.
but see if there anything starts to click. Kathy?
It's more proactive. I see what you're saying. I think I agree with that too. It's more you're choosing to think about something, whereas awareness is just like I like Ken's description of just the boats floating across down the river. They're just floating and you're just letting them go by and you're aware of them, but you're not choosing to think about any one of them yet.
But I'm thinking, Kathy, your thinking can be passive as well if you're mindless, right? And we're not present to our thoughts. We can,
Like in the back of our minds, that kind of thing.
where you're ruminating about something or worrying and you're not aware that you're,
Yeah.
you're
that
not
too.
aware of your thinking, and it can still have that passive flavor to it.
Well,
Yeah. And I know what you mean by passive and active in what we're talking about, William. but really contemplation is not passive. It's actively inactive.
Mhm.
It's effortlessly effortful. I don't know. This is the problem we have when we're trying to discuss something like this. Words just fail us, and ultimately you cannot describe. It's inexpressible. But if we try to get some kind of framework around it, when you have the experience, it can be reinforcing. You can say, oh, okay, that's what they were trying to say. Same thing when you read the mystics. They just sound like gobbledygook. But once you've had the experience, then it's like, oh, that's all they meant. Okay, now I get it. So, whatever words start to resonate, if you can run with those, great. It may resonate with somebody and not with another, because we're just kind of throwing words at this, but we're trying to describe as best we can this difference between thoughts and awareness, right? Because there is a huge difference and we need to know what that is. Randy, did we cut you off?
Yeah, you did.
I'm
Now
so
I
sorry.
realize I've been against you all. So how I like to explain it is that thinking is how we form our psychological experience. It's how we structure our reality. And consciousness is what makes it real. And this all happens in our mind. And all that kind of stuff can be you've probably seen the iceberg where it talks about the part that's popping up out of the water. That's our conscious thinking. And then as we go deeper in the water, where there's the subconscious and unconscious. That's personal thinking type of stuff. Now, the iceberg floats in water, right? Iceberg made of the same stuff as the water. All of me?
Gotcha. And everybody, we really need to listen to Randy.
Contemplative is knowing that the water is surrounding you and not having to use these words. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
To some of us it will, and to some of us it won't.
But it's all made of the same stuff. It's not personal. Again, just as I said that, everybody had their, I don't know what the hell he's talking about, or, oh, okay, yeah, okay, I kind of get it and stuff. That's personal thinking. But the source of the intellect, or excuse me, the insight, the inspiration, the wisdom that is deeper and wider than our personal thinking. If I can calm my mind and get in a contemplative state where I'm not judging, then that iceberg kind of, I don't know, blends in with the stuff around me. So that's my 2 cents, and there's a lot of hypotheses in it.
And we really need to listen to Randy because he's got the light of God shining upon
He's
him.
glowing.
Yeah, well, yeah, there you go.
See what you can do about that, Randy.
Randy, whenever you say iceberg, I just think Titanic. So we're gonna go down from there. So just kidding.
Hey, Bill, were you going to say something, buddy?
Yeah, I there were a couple of guys that I would scuba dive with when I was a kid in South Dakota, in high school. And I didn't do this, but they started diving under the ice on the Missouri River. And I remember my one friend talking to me about the current where they started, the ice was thin and they could just pop their head up and come up and down out of the water. But as the water drifted, they got out in deeper water and the ice was thicker. And so he came up and he tried to break through the ice, but it was thicker and it pulled his mask down. So his mask was down below his chin and he just was panicking. But this, when Avalos talks about, I came to realize by experience that thinking is not the same as mindfulness, he recognized he was panicking. And he just, because of his experience in diving, he said, I just need to relax and put my mask back up and clear my mask and not panic. And it was like that experience that he had, an inexperienced person would have drowned, most likely. But because he had the experience in his diving and practicing overcoming that panic or the feeling of being smothered or cold water in your face, There was something about, and I maybe this is awareness, it was experience that said to him, just settle. And he is able to calm down, clear his mask, and swim back to thinner ice, and up he came. I don't know why that visual came to me as this first sentence she's talking about, came to realize by experience that thinking is not the same as mindfulness, because it's still using the brain. The thinking is getting you into the panic situation, and yet the mindfulness is saying it's not as bad as it may appear. I don't know if that connects for anybody, but to me, that kind of jumped at me when I heard this first sentence.
So, Bill, that reminds me of yes, of my situation before. It's what we call my monkey brain. I feel so agitated, felt unsafe, felt really agitated until somebody teaches me that to say, no, this is temporary. You're not gonna die, but my brain is panicking. Same with your scuba diving friend. You're in a safe place.
And your body was telling you with your high blood pressure that you better knock it off or you're going to explode.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what I had told myself. I felt like exploding.
Yeah.
Until I have to say, you're okay. This is temporary. But then, then the mind or the brain has to take over saying, you'll be okay. This is temporary. Otherwise, it's in a panic mode.
For me, when I'm going through a difficult time, when my mind would say, oh, you're not going to get through this. This is just too much. And then I give it to the Lord. I cast my burden on the Lord. And he carries me and he gets me through the situation where I thought I wasn't going to get through it. And God said, I'm there. I'm here for you. And that's what I think mindfulness gets to be, where you can go through things you never thought you could when you've got the Lord with you.
And Carol, when you go into that mode, are you still processing mentally the
No, I give it to the Lord. If it gets to be too much, I just go, Lord, you've got to take this. And he goes, I'm here for you. I will get you through this. I might not get the situation better. It might not change the way I want it to. But God, the Lord just says, Carol, I'm going to carry you through this. You've got to be there for your daughters and your grandchildren. And you're a witness to them that you can get through things in this life that your mind tells, your thoughts tell you you're never going to get through this. This is just too difficult. And I just keep casting my cares on the Lord, and it doesn't become so intense. And there's the peace that passes all understanding when you give it to the Lord. You go, Lord, I can't take this. And he goes, give it to me. I'm waiting for you to give it to me. And the situation may not get better. It could even get worse. But you just have this supernatural peace. And I think that's what the mindfulness is for me, is I'm not so much in the situation anymore. I'm looking to the Lord rather than the situation to get better.
So this is fascinating to me. Just consider the last three, Bill, Ellen, and Carol that have shared here. And they have all described their situations so very differently. Even you can add Randy into this too. They've all described this so differently. And yet, what's the common thread between all of them? Common thread is from over processing in the mind, that just kind of dissipates. And then there's that presence there that allows you to act. In Bill's friend's case, it allows the man to be able to save his own life and come out. It allows Ellen to get through her issues and Carol to get through hers, and Randy. But that is the salient point, is is that we stop actively processing with the mind, trying to control the situation and force the outcome that we want, rather than then flowing with the motion, and we end up getting someplace. That's, I think, really the difference in the feel between this thinking and awareness, or thinking and mindfulness, is that ability to just step away, but everybody is expressing it so very differently. And that's the way it works, because we're all going to experience this differently, but it's the same thing. So look for the commonality between them, and then see if you can attach that to your own experience, so that it becomes, more real for you. And you have a better way of being able to approach the contemplative practice, and make it more repeatable for yourself.
So I have to say too, what you said about repeatable. So Carol, thank you. That was also what I have said to myself to the prayer. This is yours. Please take it. I cannot carry this burden. And this is the thing too. The first time I went, when we had the Good Friday, you nail all these issues and problems to the cross. Okay, there was a feeling of relief. However, I take it back. I have to tell myself, give it back again. You know what I mean? Like, I'm carrying it again.
And that oscillation is just going to be part of human experience. Basically, we just oscillate our way through life. We're always back and forth. The pendulum is always swinging. But as we get better and better at this, what we notice is that there is larger spaces between the oscillations, and we have more time in that space that Carol calls giving it to God, and you all are going to call it whatever you call it. And for Carol, that's the ritual. That is the actual technique. Giving it to God for Carol signals moving into that more contemplative space. If centering prayer is about introducing the sacred word, if meditation is about returning to breath, saying a prayer, whatever it is that helps us to be able to come right back down to ground, that's our particular technique. It doesn't really matter what it is. We're trying to enter the same kind of space, though. And that's the real important thing to get from all of this that we're going through. Because everybody's going to have a different way of seeing it. And even if it's the same way of expressing it, we're going to still experience it differently, because we're all different. And that's okay. But that's where we're trying to get. We're trying to get into that space where the mind is no longer in control and trying to control. That's the judgment that Jesus is always warning against. Don't judge. Because as soon as you do, you are underneath all of that. Whatever standard you use is now defining you. And that's what we're trying to step away from. So Teresa is figuring all this out, and she's writing about it in The Interior Castle. And then she says, thoughts fly around so fast that only God can anchor them. It was driving me crazy to see the faculties of my soul, right, calmly absorbed in remembrance of God, while my thoughts, on the other hand, were wildly agitated. Now, this is the 16th century. Just remind ourselves, it's the 16th century. Normally, when we think about something 300 or 400 years ago, we think about a time that is so calm and serene, and it's before cell phones and anything electronic. They were able to just really be a part of nature and be, so grounded. No, they're people just like us. We will always find in any situation a way to be agitated. That's what we do, right? Our minds are going to run crazy with us if we let them. And so here's this woman in 16th century Spain experiencing what we experience here in 21st century America. It's just the way we operate. Now, this idea of the faculties of the soul, is the mind a faculty of the soul? Well, if we're defining the mind as we have been as egoic consciousness, that part of our brain that thinks, talks to us and judges and compartmentalizes and contrasts and compares and does all that kind of stuff, then no, I don't think the mind is a faculty of the soul. How do we define soul? We spent half an hour on this a few weeks ago, but I think just as a shorthand now and for our purposes here, maybe we can define soul as that living part of us that is not physical and it's not intellectual. So what is left? If you take out the physical and you take out the intellectual part of our lives, what's left? Well, it's going to be the immaterial, maybe what we call the spiritual. It also could be the emotional. It could be things that exist beneath thought, but are still part of our awareness and part of our makeup. All that can maybe part of the soul, that living part of us. Maybe we just call it life force. Maybe we can call it that. But we're trying to make a distinction here because there's a part of us that lives, and it's not necessarily spiritual and ethereal. It's still a part of our makeup as a human being. That's why I think maybe emotions could be also a faculty of the soul in a certain sense. But this gets pretty squishy, and you come up with the kind of distinctions that you want to make. But if our soul is going to be used more in connection with our spirit, then certainly our egoic minds are working against all of that, because they are going to keep us separated from. They're going to be bringing all of our focus to a point, and then that is going to be like the sun in our consciousness, and it's just going to blow out the sky. We're not going to be able to see anything else at that point. So it's driving her crazy to see the faculties of her soul, all right, those parts of her that can be completely serene, completely absorbed, pure presence, while her thoughts are just running around like crazy. So this is the part that she's trying to make the distinction and try to get a handle on. And then Rohr steps back in. Your thoughts are always hopping around, always making commentaries on everything. Buddhists rightly refer to this as the monkey mind. Once you give your thoughts too much certainty and centrality, they will almost immediately grab onto a legitimizing emotion tightly and righteously. So he's got two thoughts going on there. So the first one is just understanding that we have this monkey mind. It's chattering, it's jumping from branch to branch, it's taking all your attention, and you're following it around in the tree as it goes. That's why we have talked about contemplative practice as the ability to give the monkey brain a banana. And then as the monkey goes and sits and calmly eats the banana, then our spirit can come out to play. You know, I was taught the rosary as a Catholic child growing up, and it was pure torture for me to sit and try to say the rosary. But prayer beads exist in every tradition and culture in one way, shape, or form. Why are prayer beads used? Why are they important? Because they give the monkey brain a banana. That's why. If you have this string of beads and you don't have to count them, you don't have to think about it, and you just go ahead and go through them, and you're saying prayers that you also don't have to think about anymore because they're just drilled down deep into your procedural memory, your muscle memory, you can go into a complete state of contemplative awareness, that choiceless awareness, while you're saying the rosary, while you're using the prayer beads, whatever you're doing. And because now the monkey brain has been given this inane task to do, and it sits there quietly and does it, well, then you can really be present. Contemplation, whether it's centering prayer or whether it's meditation, is doing exactly the same thing. We're giving that monkey brain a banana so that it can calm down and we can just be present and not have to deal with it anymore. Then he brings this next thought, which is a real important one. Once you give your thoughts too much certainty and centrality, they will almost immediately grab onto a legitimizing emotion. Think about that, legitimizing emotion. I have a right to be angry about this. I have a right to be, hurt. I have a right to be victimized. I have a right to feel what I'm feeling. And as soon as you do that, he says, once emotion reinforces thought, or vice versa. Once emotion reinforces thought or thought reinforces emotion, it triples its power over you. Now you have that legitimizing emotion also triggering you at the same time that the thoughts have taken you away from the present moment. We see this happening all the time is in politics, don't we? I mean, isn't that what's going on every time you turn on the TV? I mean, all of these emotions are being attached to the fact that we have grabbed so tightly onto one thought or another, left, right, Republican, Democrat, Trump, Biden, whatever it happens to be, we've grabbed onto this, we've attached an emotion to it, and now we're off and running. So this is the thing that he's talking about, but it happens at all levels and all thoughts. Once we attach so much importance to them, they are going to find an emotion that is going to reinforce them. And now we are really not present. Once your thoughts ally with your emotions, you are just being drug around. That train has left the station. So that's another thing to be aware of as we're trying to step away from all of this stuff. Making sense?
So Dave, that sounds very different than what we were just talking about a second ago. I mean, you had mentioned, and if you know, if you're right about soul, and that could have deeper emotion that maybe is not this kind of emotion where you're attaching something that's a right or wrong or like an emotional offendedness. That's different than maybe a deeper emotion that is tied to the soul that maybe is not we're not as conscious of. So that sounds different, right? You're speaking two different kinds of emotions in that sense. Am I correct?
Yeah, and emotions, feelings. I mean, we get again, the words that just start to fail us. But I think that emotional content can get attached to spiritual encounter in a very beautiful way. And the trouble is that we tend to attach more to the emotion because at least there's something there, some kind of feeling there. And then we end up chasing more and more emotional responses, kind of like a junkie with the drug, rather than being able to just sit and find the emotion, the spiritual encounter in any given moment. Yeah, it's so difficult to define some of these terms because everybody looks at, especially the idea of soul, differently. The ancient Jews just saw the soul as the living part of us. We were living beings, nefesh haya, and so it was all one thing. There was no distinction. There was no tripartite man, mind and heart and spirit and that sort of thing. It was just one thing. But if we're trying to make some distinctions here, trying to do the best I can to make the distinction between mind and soul and thoughts and awareness, and where emotions belong in all of this is a good question. But
I
when the
think
emotions come to the surface like this and we focus on the emotion, then it's functioning the same way as a thought, only much more powerful.
I think that's the distinction for me. And you said it in those words you just used, when I have a right to have this emotion. Now that's a very different kind of emotion than just the essence of a feeling or that you're having that's deeper. That to me distinguishes it. So that's a thank you for that.
Yeah, and to use Sarah's words, now we're judging rather than just witnessing, right?
Exactly.
If that helps.
I have learned to distinguish over the years too. Like when I would have more of that monkey brain, that agitation, that anxiety. Now I look back, that's not me. So it's the same to as a person having a psychosis episode, psychotic episode, or somebody under the influence of drugs or alcohol. That's not the true person, but that's what the mind expresses. Or somebody, anything like a suicidal thought or a homicidal thought. That's not the person, though. That's not the soul of the person. But it's mind playing tricks on us. Or our emotions playing tricks on us. And it's temporary. Temporary meaning, right, 4 hours or 4 years. We don't know. But that's how I differentiate. That's not my true self or that person's true self.
Good point.
Our true self is going to be beneath all of this or transcending it, whichever works better for you. But it will be stepped away from these thoughts. It will be stepped away from these emotional triggers. Our true self is not touched by all of that. I like the analogy of a storm at sea. If you're on the surface and the waves are 100 feet high, you are at total risk. You're being tossed around. Go down 10 meters and you're still being roiled about 10 more meters, maybe a side-to-side motion, 10 more meters, and it's completely still. Our true self is down in that lower space where all this surface tension and agitation is not touching it. And so that's what we're trying to get in touch with. We're trying to get more and more of a feel of this inner self, this true self. self with a capital S, rather than the small self that is contained inside our brains. We're trying to make that distinction. We need that brain, that egoic mind. That's our interface with the world. And as long as we're breathing here, we're going to need it. We need to be able to think critically. We need to be able to think abstractly, but we want to balance it at least, 50-50, if not 60-40 or more, with just being able to be present to the moment and actually be here and be in touch with that deeper self. So that's what we're trying to establish here with contemplative practice, is that kind of balance, and realizing that the egoic mind is a tool, a necessary tool, but it's just a tool. We use it. It doesn't define us. And that's another key that we're trying to get across. And then he makes us,
what I was
go ahead,
alluding
Randy. Yeah.
but with consciousness. So at a lower level of consciousness, we're not even aware that there's anything else but our critical, our egoic thinking, all that, our accomplishments, our acquisitions, our self-concept, our worldview, all that kind of stuff. That's all there is. That's at the lower level of consciousness. And then as it expands, it evolves, then we start realizing there's something more, and so on and so on. But I believe, when it can transcend every word that, in regards to self-concept, every word that follows I am, I like to call it personal preference. Okay. So again, the true self is, again, as it was in the Old Testament, I am. Okay. There's just a state of being in that. And again, any word after that is my thinking. But as you said, I was trying to use in that, painting that visual picture. And I'm thank you that you talked about the waves and the turbulence and stuff. As you get in my iceberg metaphor, the deeper you go, you get into that still waters. But our egoic thinking is the same mental energy. It's just the deeper water is a pure intelligent energy. Again, guys, if you didn't hear, I had been gone because I've been doing Rosicrucian studies and Hermeticism and stuff like that. And one of the first Hermetic laws is everything's mental. Okay. And if you're not aware of Hermeticism, it's ancient. The Greeks took over Egyptian thinking. But there was this concept 6,000 years ago, again, that everything's mental. And when I first heard it, I'm like, what's everything? Atoms. Yeah, everything's atoms. Okay. Energy, atoms, all, but I was focusing at first on the form, the form word. But thinking, again, everything's mental, that's the formless. Okay. That's the ethereal and such. But where they, again, the atoms and the thinking and all this kind of stuff, there is a thing called mental energy. Everything is, so my interpretation is what the language they were using long before there was microscopes and ways of knowing there was atoms and stuff, is their hypothesis is everything's energy. I know this kind of getting a little woo-woo and stuff, but I think that's not too far off. Again, trying to articulate this stuff, everything's energy. So that the universe is big E energy. It's a pure intelligence that, again, there was something that caused the Big Bang. There is something that maintains the order of this universe. There's something that's causing gravity and such. And I'm using the word intelligence. There's an intelligence things to it. Everything works with a perfect order. There's a season for everything. And that same energy is the same stuff that makes me think messed up thoughts.
So here's the thing, Randy just opened a whole new can of worms and a bunch of more words that are undefined. If you say something like everything is mental and we understand mental as thinking, as egoic thought, well, then we're cooked before we begin. Everything is not mental in the sense of thinking about it. If he's thinking of it more in terms of energy, okay. But from a contemplative point of view, Descartes was wrong. I think, therefore I am. No. It would be more, I am, therefore I think. We have to realize that I am that Randy is talking about, and everything after it is just mental again, just thoughts again, just preferences again. but our basic existence allows us to think and not the other way around. And so it's important for us to make those kinds of distinctions. And another thing, you talked about higher and lower consciousness. Yes, we want to try to achieve a higher consciousness, but we need to make sure that we understand that higher consciousness does not mean more thinking or higher thinking. Higher consciousness is higher awareness. More stuff gets in, we're aware of more things, but we're not thinking about them more. And I suppose the last distinction I would make is that any expression of identity that you put into words is not your true identity. As soon as you put it into words, you've already stepped away from your true identity because that remains inexpressible. So, you know, and all of that stuff may just sound like a lot of gobbledygook, like Randy was saying, just woo-woo. But there are real distinctions to be made within those sayings. And it's important for us to start to wrestle with the paradox implied in them, but not to take them, you know, to try to just figure them out. It's about just realize, okay, there is a paradox there. I'm not going to resolve it. I'm not going to try to flop down to one side or another. I'm going to try to experience the middle ground between the horns of that paradox and see what happens. Because in the experiencing, you will understand something, you will know something, but it won't be rational, so to speak. You know, so it's, again, we're really overcomplicating things here. I think the main thing is that, yeah, be aware that rationally all of these contradictions, seeming contradictions and paradoxes exist. As we just allow ourselves to move into choiceless awareness, fine-tune our ability to let go of the thinking and just be, then a lot of this stuff will start to make sense in our own way. And then we'll try to express it to somebody else and they'll be just as confused as we all are tonight. That's the way that works. We're over time, but just to finish this section so that I'm not in trouble with Ellen. He says
that was two paragraphs in an hour.
Yeah, well, yeah, I know, but we're going to do 3, Ellen, so I'm proud of myself. The things you're agitated about right now, you will not be in a few hours or days, so they cannot be that real. You know, this reminds me of, you know, parents who are you know, just interacting with their kids, and the child comes in and is so upset. Or maybe the mother has to drop the child off at daycare and the child is screaming bloody murder and clinging to her leg and they have to peel her off. And the woman goes through her entire day feeling guilty and horrible that she had to leave her child. The child was fine 3.5 minutes after mom was out of sight, right? It's what we hold on to that becomes permanentized, that gives us a sense of reality. But these emotions are fleeting. They will come and go. And so, yes, we need to attach that same kind of transient quality to them and realize they're just passing emotions. And once you know that, you can choose not to give them such power and control over you to begin with. The soul is much more spacious, constant, and settled in your thoughts and than your thoughts and feelings can ever be. So, yeah, so these are the kind of distinctions that I think can help us as we move into our own practice of contemplation and maybe ground us better as we go, because it can sometimes be confusing, obviously. All right.
Right. One more thing. I'm sorry.
You always have one more thing, Ellen. That's okay. We love that about you.
This is recorded in YouTube and I want it recorded for eternity.
Okay.
I recently witnessed focused awareness in action. And it was David changing that guitar string. It was awesome. It really was. There was no panic. It was a smooth process. You did it. It was awesome to watch.
Well, thank you, Ellen. But the question is, could I have done it underneath the ice in a river?
I think you can.
Ellen, did you get a haircut?
Okay.
Yeah, come on. Did you get a haircut?
No,
we are really digressing now.
I gotta digress. Get off this. Yeah.
About a month ago, yeah.
Okay, looks good.
Scott, save us, buddy.
Vaughn, these questions are good for 7 o'clock, not 7:45. Lord, we thank you for the joy and the curiosity and the fun that we have and the encouragement that we have and all the attributes that seem unique to each one of us. Yet the more we get to know each other, the more we realize we're learning together, we're growing together, we're bonding together, we're family. And so as it comes to these classes and we invest our time in them, we just ask you to continue to bless us with peace and knowledge and wisdom, how to use the information that we're gaining and when to trust and when to walk away from and what's useful and what's good. And all the different labels we put on these various experiences we have. We're grateful, Lord, that we can explore without fear our lives and still experience your great love. And much like we do as parents, laugh when our kids are at play and mess up at something, realizing that one day they'll learn. And meanwhile, it's kind of a funny moment. We have our funny moments here, Lord, but one day we'll learn. So thank you for your patience and your love and your encouragement and your protection. We give our thanks, we give our amens, we give our love, and we do it all in your holy and precious name, Lord Jesus. Thank you so much. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. All right. Thanks everyone for another great conversation, and we will see you on Sunday. And
Thank you, everyone.
Tanya,
Good
hopefully
night.
we didn't scare you too badly and you'll be back.
Not at all. I loved it. Thank you for allowing me to join. Looking forward to next week.
Absolutely.
Nice having you. Yes.
Great, nice having you.
Okay.
Good
Good night.
night.
Good
Good
night,
night.
everybody.
Dave,
Yes.
what
Hold on a second.
hospital
Hold on a
did you?
second. Wait. Let me go ahead and stop the recording here.